So this is my 2002 Honda CR125. So this cylinder got super hot and it looks like the ring's actually seized against the side. It does actually kick over and run, but the fact that it has seized up once probably means that something's not quite right, and obviously don't want to keep on riding it. So the plan really is to probably take the cylinder off and maybe look at getting that sent off to get checked over and repaired if needed, and then probably get a new piston. Okay, so the first thing to do here really is probably just to drain the coolant out, which is just from this little bolt here. So this has the water pump, so these pipes go through to the engine and then obviously up to the radiators as well. We've got to take all the fairings off and the tank and the seat to get access to the top of here. So that shouldn't take long, so let's just crack on with that. Okay then, so this is what we've got now. So see, we've obviously got full access to the cylinder head here, and just generally better access to everything else. Doesn't feel too bad actually. Yeah, so we've got some scoring here. It's not actually too bad. I really can't feel any of this that you can see here. I think that we can find the spot where it's seized, which seems like it was just here where the screwdriver is. So there's a little mildly rough patch here. You can just about feel it with your fingers. It definitely looks a little bit more chewed up than the rest of it, so I'm guessing that is where it's seized. Okay then, so to get the cylinder off is a slightly more involved process. First we've got to take the exhaust off. Obviously you've got to take all of these coolant pipes off that run to the cylinder, as we can see just in there. Power valve mechanism is in here as well, so we've just got to unlink that power valve, and then there's the 4 bolts that go around the base of the cylinder. There we go. Okay then, so that is the exhaust off. So as I said, now we've got full access to the cylinder. Up next is to take this cover off here. So this has a linkage down in here, which is to the power valve, and then obviously these coolant tubes have got to come off, and then after that there's just these 4 bolts here that actually hold the cylinder onto engine casings. And I think after that we should be good to take it off. We are going to actually have to take off this exhaust, little exhaust manifold here as well, just to get the cylinder off. So there's 3 bolts there. Okay then, so I've just taken the little retaining clip off this arm here, and then if I just pull it out now, this is obviously detached from the actual cylinder itself. Shouldn't be too tight. And then we've got another 2 bolts here, so again these shouldn't be too tight. You can see that. Yeah, some pretty bad marks there, to be fair. Okay, so here's the piston. If we just take a look at that, we can see it's scored up pretty bad here. And similar here, there's some scoring here, I don't know if you can hear that. Yeah, there's also some scoring just around here as well. Okay then, so the plan for this now is to basically strip it as much as I can. That means taking out these studs, taking off this here, taking out the power valve mechanism, and then also the power valve itself, which is the valves that sit in there, which you can just about see moving. So that we've got a fully stripped cylinder, and then I think we're going to have to send this off to hopefully have some work done to it to see if it can be saved. And obviously need at minimum a new piston as well, because that piston isn't going to go back in the bike. So yeah, I'll just proceed with stripping this down now then. Okay, so it's a couple of days later now, and I've sent the cylinder off. Just had a call from the place that I've sent it off to, and they say that they're gonna essentially bore the cylinder out to fit an oversized piston. So they're gonna do that with the cylinder, and then obviously provide the right piston as well. So I think the next thing that I need to do here is to take the piston off, and you can actually see in this light a little bit more of the damage. I've got really good sunlight here. You can sort of see bits where it's caught up here as well. So that we'll take that off now. That's not a huge job, just taking out this pin here, and the piston should come straight out, and then we can have a closer look at it. Okay then, so here is the piston. This actually did not do very much time in the bike at all. I sort of put this in hoping everything would be okay, suspecting that it probably wasn't going to be, so this has only done probably 4 hours in the bike or something. You can see there's a lot more wear on it than it looks like there should be, because yeah, it probably wasn't the right size. Probably just did need some work doing on the cylinder all along. You can see obviously various score marks, lots of wear, much more wear than you would hope for a piston that's only done a couple of hours. So I am kind of contemplating doing a full engine rebuild on this because I don't know when it was last done. I've not got any history with the bike. Obviously this is sort of a thing here, just checking this bottom end bearing on the crank. So we've obviously got the side to side play, but then the up and down. So I'm just checking the Conrod big end bearing here. So obviously these are allowed to have sort of side to side play, but you're not really supposed to have any up and down play. I have just checked this and it does seem like there is some up and down play. So if I to eliminate this side to side play, if I essentially pull the rod towards me to make it flush up with this side of the crankshaft. Now if I actually try and move it up and down, I can actually find some play. So hopefully you can hear this. So I do think, just to be safe, we're probably going to take the engine out and do a full engine rebuild. So there's a special tool to hold this, which I've not got, so I've just sort of jammed in this towel here just to create some friction. So this is all bound now to the actual engine, and I'm just trying to get this out, this middle nut here. Yeah, so this is the new clutch basket that I put in not too long ago, so it's still pretty much brand new. Not sure if it's supposed to be dark red inside, but... So I think the next steps then are probably going to be to get this part of the case off here, which is just basically covering up, you know, taking us back to here and then letting us see what's behind these as well. So there's a couple more 8mm bolts going all the way around, so we'll take those out now. So the first thing that we're looking at here is the water pump shaft. That doesn't look too good to me. I'm not sure really what the expectation is with these, but that's, you know, it's pretty scored up, bit of corrosion on it by the looks of things. That's interesting. It does just pull out as a whole, just like that. That's sort of how the kickstart works. So you've got the cam there, spring, a couple of springs, spacer, and then I believe this, which is part of our shifting mechanism, does just pull out. Yep. So this is the spline here that the actual shifter goes onto on the outside of the bike, and obviously that operates this down here, which turns the shift drum within the gearbox. So I think what the next thing that we can do is just take all of these bolts that we can see out and then try to get this crankshaft bolt off as well. That'll help us to actually split the cases apart. Okay, so I've just managed to get this crank bolt undone finally. This was one of the most stubborn bolts ever. To be fair, I think it's like pretty much the only thing this impact driver hasn't done, and I've done a lot of car work with this as well. Okay then, so we've now got the bolt out, and I guess we can just take this off. Okay, so it's now the next day, it's Saturday, and we've just had a couple of deliveries. So I've got this tool here, which is the flywheel puller, and it looks like that's going to work just on a first glance, which is good news. I then just got some tools to split the cases and then also to pull the case back together, and that's literally how that got delivered. And particularly this thing here, not really sure how that works with all these things, but we'll figure that out when we get to it. So it looks like now next steps are to pull the flywheel off. Once we pull the flywheel off, I think then we can then go ahead to split the cases, just taking all of these 8mm bolts out, and we can use one of these tools in this box to help us split the cases. Fingers crossed this doesn't need too much torque to get this off. Not too bad so far. I think that's it. So that actually was not too hard. To be fair, nowhere near as hard as the crank, so I'm not concerned about causing any damage to anything, so should all be good. And this is our flywheel already. Next up then is just going to be to undo all of these bolts on this side, so let's get on with that. You can see a gap in the cases here, just starting to form. Okay. Interesting. Not sure whether the gearbox is supposed to be full of metal or not. I mean, that was sarcasm. That wasn't clear. The magnetic bolt's done its little bit here, but there's really... Look at that. This crank is also... I feel like it's taken a bit of a beating over its life. What's going on here? Just going to sit this on a socket. It's been a little bit stubborn. What the inside of the case looks like. This crank bearing does not look very good. See, there's some resistance here. Just stops. And if I force it, it will go, and then it gets stuck again. Now it's freed up. Look at this. Okay, so there's a washer here. Okay then, so I'm just going to try and get the crank out of this side of the case. So I've obviously just gone and got this tool set up on this side. Hoping this is going to be quite straightforward, to be fair. Yeah, I can feel that going already. Okay then, so it's yet again a couple of more days later and we've had more parts delivered. I essentially prepared this part of the case here. So this is obviously like the water pump clutch housing. Now that's all pretty much ready to go. Just I think one more bearing to put in there and then that's going to be done. So I just wanted to cover everything that I've got here basically to do this rebuild, so I'll just cover this quickly. So first thing I got was a water pump rebuild kit. So that included the gaskets and the bearings for the water pump. In addition to that, I did get this new, I think it's called like a metal separator or something. I'll show you the old one. This is what sort of a 20-year-old thing looks like that's probably not had coolant running it. It's probably had water and stuff running that, so pretty corroded. I did try and clean it up, but then thought it wasn't worth it. So that's essentially a full new water pump rebuild. And then what I do actually have here as well is a new water pump shaft. So I didn't really want to have to put the old one into the bike, so I'll just get the old one now. Okay, so I've just got the old one here. To be honest, this is one of those things that didn't really want to have to pay for, but did pay for it, and in the end was happy that I did, because I don't know how well this is going to come out on camera, but this is actually really worn and quite pitted. I don't know if you can hear this. It's definitely not smooth. And obviously this is where your water pump seals ride, so if this is pitted, it's either not going to seal or it's going to wear your seals out quickly, so there's no point putting that back in the bike, so that's going to go in the bin once I'm done. The new one is, you know, much nicer. I've got a lot more faith that that's going to actually last. So with the new water pump shaft, water pump separator, new water pump seals, and then also bearings and obviously gaskets, that's essentially going to be a full new water pump apart from the impeller, which actually does look okay. Next up then we do have this kit here, which is a gearbox bearing rebuild kit. So this has all of your gearbox bearings outside of your crank bearings, and I've just got these crank bearings here, so these are Koyo crank bearings. So essentially with these I do have all new bearings for the bike. The only thing that I will mention, which was strange, is I was lacking, you see I've got two bearings here and they are actually slightly different. Now they're the same size, but they're just a different manufacturer, because I did have to order another one of these. I can't actually remember what the bearing was for now, because there's so many in the cases, but I did realise that I was missing one. And then additionally you'll just see this one here as well, which didn't come in any of the kits, and that is a bearing for the power valve, so that's a replacement for this. This is definitely sounding like it's on its last legs. So yeah, so that's pretty much every single bearing in the engine is going to be refreshed. Next up then we've got seals. So I had to order these two seals separately, so these actually go with the crank bearings, so these are the crank seals, and then this was a separate kit. A couple of these seals of which I've already used on the case over there that I've just shown you, but we've got a couple more seals here, a couple more seals to use, and these two I think are actually duplicates. So these two were for the water pump, so they're going to be duplicates, and these are the other seals that I've got as well from that kit. So again, that's going to be, I think every single seal in the engine is going to be redone with those that I've just shown you. I've then got all of these gaskets, so I actually ended up with two gasket kits just because the piston came with this, and then I ordered a full gasket and seal kit separately. So obviously we've got all of the usual seals here, even some duplicates again like the water pump and things, so should have plenty of gaskets to go around. This is the Pro X or Prox full gasket kit, and that actually did come with these seals as well. So I've just actually opened this to take the seals out. So plenty of gaskets there, so yeah, obviously all of those are going to be new. And then we actually have the piston here, so we're going for a Wassenaar piston. This is now 0.5 millimeter oversized, because I did have to have some work done on the cylinder, which I'll show in a second. So we've got the piston ring in there and a little bit of documentation. We've got the top end bearing there, which is also a duplicate because I've got another one with a crank, which I'll show in a second. And then if we actually open the piston, we can see we've got the connecting rod, which is in there, and then that's the piston itself. So it's a forged piston. And then let's look at the crank next. So gone for a Wassenaar crankshaft. You can see that that's new there. So we've obviously got new conrod, new crankshaft, new they've provided new bearing with it here as well. And the crankshaft is basically the reason why I chose to do this rebuild. So here's the new and the old one together. Obviously the new one just looks much newer, but then if you actually do look at the play in these, this might be helpful if you're ever looking at the sort of top end of your bike and you want to just see what the bottom end is like. So obviously got the brand new one here and then the used one. I actually have no idea how many hours are on this as well, which is another reason why I rebuilt it, but I think it's probably fair to say there's a fair few hours on it. I don't think it was done recently. So if we have a look at this movement, see it's got that movement there. In addition to that movement, there is also some actual twisting movement. So I can actually twist. And then if I push the conrod up to the side to make sure that I'm not moving it side to side, and then if I pull it to and from me, I can actually feel a small amount of movement. It's probably a fraction of a millimeter, but still. that noise that I can make there is actually the noise of the play. So that's all up and down play. The new one, I would say the top of it moves side to side, probably less than half as much. There is some movement. You probably can't even see it. I can just about feel it. I can't really see it myself. And then there's obviously absolutely no twisting at all. So as I showed, this one does actually rock back and forth and twists. And then obviously this one doesn't have any up and down play whatsoever. So you know, from my point of view, that does kind of confirm that this one definitely had some wear on it. How much wear? I'd say that's probably fairly worn. There's probably some experts watching. Yeah, I'd say that's fairly worn, to be fair, so I think that probably would generally be advised to be replaced at this point, but it does just generally look like a bit of a mess. It looks like it wants to be retired, so definitely glad that I've got the new one. And lastly then, we'll just look at the cylinder. So this actually only costs £50, which is about $60 to actually get bored out. So you will have seen the marks before I actually took the cylinder off, the scoring on the cylinder. So they've actually taken, you know, a fraction of a millimetre off. I think, like I said, now I've got a piston which is half a millimetre oversized. So they've obviously just bored this out and then rehoned it as well. So it's kind of hard to show this on camera, but you can see it's got all of the cross hatching on that you'd expect. And then this cylinder has actually been had a liner put in it, a new sleeve. And I had noticed before that there were some sort of gaps around the actual aluminium and the steel. And it looks like they've actually put some sort of filler compound in here. So you can see this line here is all new, and then they've actually ground that down to be flat. And then additionally, this is probably going to be really hard to show on camera, but within some of the ports there's sort of like a silver finish. Not going to be able to see that, but essentially you can see that they've tried to put some filler between the steel and the aluminium to keep this cylinder cool. So undoubtedly that's going to help. It's also around here as well. I don't know if you can see this. There's a little bit of filler in there. What was a gap? I do remember seeing that as a gap before. So yeah, all in all, seems like a good job, and it seems like they've actually tried to keep it cool and keep it running cool, which is obviously hopefully going to make it last longer. The only job that I've got to do now is just replace that bearing, and then that's all ready to start going and getting built up again. So here are the cases. So I'm pretty happy with where the cases are at in terms of their sort of condition, how clean they are, and we're pretty much ready to start putting the bearings back in. I have just taken the bearings out of the freezer that I've shown you, so I have been storing them in there for when they actually go in the cases. I've decided just to start on this cover here. It's like the smallest and easiest thing, I guess, so I have actually just made the very first start of just putting this new oil seal in here. And then in terms of the actual guide that I'm following, I'm just following the actual manual here, so you can see I'm just on this water pump section, and it sort of walks you through everything, including like the direction of the water pump seals and all that sort of stuff, because it's not always obvious which way these things go round. So yeah, I'm just basically going to be following this. Okay then, so I managed to get that bearing in pretty easily. Didn't really need very much heat, and I did put the bearing in the freezer just for 5 or 10 minutes. And then we've got the two seals in, so obviously one of the seals is essentially an oil seal, and then this seal that you can see here is the water seal to keep obviously the oil and water separate. Just before we put this piece to one side for the time being, I did order a couple of new small pieces of hardware here. those bearings just went in super easy. Basically no hammering required at all. I have got one bigger one left to go on the other side of the other case, and a couple of small ones as well to go on the other side of the other case. So I put the oven to like 270 degrees centigrade, which is like pretty much as hot as the oven goes, and left them in there for an hour and a half or so, and then obviously had the bearings in the freezer, and they all just pretty much fell in. And for the other one, I'd left that for about 10 minutes with the main bearing in, and the main bearing was still rattling around in there. So yeah, you definitely don't need to go as hot as I did. I think only one of them actually needed a little bit of a tap, and this one obviously didn't go in quite straight, so it needed a little tap as well, but kind of fell in once I'd tapped it. So none of them really needed hammering in, to be fair. So that kind of went easier than I expected. I've seen other videos where people have to hammer these in and press them in and all that sort of stuff. So what I'm going to do now then is just wait for both cases to cool off, and then we can actually put the final few bearings in the other side of the other case, and then we can start putting the seals in. Okay then, so this case is now pretty cooled down. It's probably been 15-20 minutes in total, and about half that time was it sitting outside as well. I'm just going to put these little retainers on now to hold this bearing in, because this is still slightly loose. It will fall out if I turn the case over. Okay then, so the case is pretty cool now. Let's see if this goes in easily. So this has just come out of the freezer. Yeah, again it just drops in. So that's interesting. You don't have to heat these up nearly as much as I thought you did. Just got another bearing here. Right, okay then, so we are getting ready to put the actual gearbox back in. So I've got all of the gears here on the shaft as they came out of the bike. I did sort of go over these. There are some YouTube videos showing in detail like what's supposed to be in here, and as well as the part diagrams online. So basically just checked over how it came off the bike and put it back together in the same way. So as far as I'm aware, these will just slide in as follows. Okay then, so the next thing to do is put these gear selectors in. So we have two of the larger ones. We have this R and L. So this one says R9D and this one just says L. So both those go facing up, and this one slides in at the bottom. So basically we're sliding these into the, it's like pretty obvious the grooves that they slide into. L goes in there, and then the smaller one of the three is the center, which just goes into there. And now that we've got those in, we can now put the actual gear selector drum in. So this has got a thread on this side which actually holds it into the bearing from the other side. So if we just slide this in, so that's now all the way in, obviously spins freely, and then we basically just start selecting gears. So slide these things in where you can get them. There's no real wrong way to do this. Kind of have to lift the gear up from the other side for that bottom one, just because it's a bit heavier and it doesn't want to lift up on its own. So as you can see, we've got all three of these things now actually meshed in with the actual selector. And then next up is this shaft to go in. So I'm probably just going to put some oil on this. So I've just put some oil on this shaft. Should just slide right in. Just like that. Same again for the other one, put some oil on it. There's no direction to this one either. Well, sorry, there was for the other one. The tapered end was facing downwards. So we've now got both those shafts in. You can see that both of those gears, the gears here, line up at the same height, which is good. We do actually have the washer here as well, so don't want to forget about that. And then no washer on this side. Okay then, right, so yeah, we've got the gearbox in now and the shifting mechanism. I've just gone and put these dowel pins in with a little bit of grease on them as well, hopefully so that they don't seize in there in case this ever does come apart in the future. And I've just gone and put the thinnest layer of grease on this case here, hopefully just to make sure that the gasket is held in place while we're putting everything together, but also maybe it'll make it easier to come apart in the future if that ever happens. Just demonstrating the shift drum mechanism then, so this is all the way anti-clockwise at the moment, so this would basically represent first gear, I believe. Now you can actually change this sort of by spinning the gears and twisting it clockwise. So obviously first gear, you can see that both these shafts are spinning and all of the gears are spinning on both shafts. If I spin this and then just do this, you can see that this is now essentially neutral. If I keep on going, just to this spot here, and to be fair, if you are doing this yourself, there aren't any definite places that the gears are. The way that I can tell where the gears are is because there's like a little pale mark. I don't know if you can see this here, like on the top of this groove. It's as if these actual shifting forks have actually sat there for a long time. So you can sort of see where the gears are. So that's just about in gear now, and you can see that's caught it, and now both shafts are turning again. That's just then gone and fell back into neutral on its own. So that's now between second and third. And then if we keep on going, we get to a spot just here, which now is engaging third gear. If we keep on going again, that should now be in neutral, which it is. And then fourth gear's there. I'm just looking at the sort of wear marks on the drum again, so that's now fourth. A little bit more should get us into neutral, maybe too much there. So that it kind of doesn't want to sit there, but that's, as you can see, that's neutral. And then if I carry on into fifth, that's now the end of the full clockwise rotation of the drum, and the gears are, well, both shafts are now turning. So that kind of shows that the gearbox is working as we expect, which is really good. And I think that basically means that we are ready to put this back together. As a reminder, we've got a washer there, but not one there. We've got our dowel pins in, we've got our gaskets here, so we'll now just put the actual main case gasket on, and then hopefully we can put the crank in and get the other side of the case on. Okay then, so I've got the other side of the case here, and I have had to put this back into the oven and take the seals out because essentially got this bearing stuck on the crank because that's an interference fit, and obviously the bearing came out with the crank. This is why I froze the crank, so it's all wet, which is not ideal. So I've now got the hot case here on the other side in the hopes that it will just push in essentially. Okay, well the cases are together. That was a huge struggle. So this side didn't really want to go together, so I had to absolutely whack this side to get this side down. with this, and same with this side. I didn't really want to just pull on, so I still had to do some whacking with it, but I mean the cases are fully together and I could not get this to pull this anymore, so I guess let's see what we're left with now. Hopefully the crank turns smoothly. I ended up taking this ring off as well, so in the videos that I've seen of people doing this, they leave this on this puller tool, but I felt like it was conflicting with the wrong things and like trying to pull the crank in sideways. So it was the first time that I just tried it with this ring off, and it basically only contacted the actual inner lip of where the seal sits, and seems to have done a good job, and I can see that the bearing is actually pulled all the way in there. So that's, to be fair, that runs very smoothly, which is very good. So yeah, that was harder than I was expecting, to be fair, to get the crank in and to get everything lined up in here, get all the bearings in, because you heat the case up then the bearings start falling out. So yeah, definitely didn't make a smooth job of that, but I think from what I can see here, everything's okay. Okay then, so I'm just going to put this arm back in first. So spring goes in this orientation, then the washer, then the arm, which goes in that orientation. So the hook from the spring actually goes into this notch here, and then the spring actually rides over this sort of post here. So the spring, sorry, it doesn't ride over it, it slides over it, and then the arm and the washer both actually clamp down onto the post itself. And the torque spec for this is 12 Newton meters in the manual. And if I didn't say already, I did put some Loctite in this, in the bolt as well. And then that's that torqued. Next up then we put the shift drum on. So obviously we've got to pull this out of the way to actually get the shift drum on. And the shift drum actually does locate into this pin here onto the other side of the drum that we've just put in the gearbox. So we've obviously got to pull the arm out of the way. Okay, so I've got the drum engaged with the pin on the back of it, and then we'll just actually torque this up now. The locking pliers are just holding the arm out of the way so that doesn't put any sort of sideways force on the drum, which might end up pushing it out of the locating pin. Okay then, so next up is this plate along with the actual sort of selector thing over here. Just tiny parts in that you really don't want to lose. So you have a spring and a cap which sits in these little holes, so there's two of them, 2 springs and 2 caps, and then you've got these little paddle arm things here, so these actually just sit rounded end into the rounded end here, and then there's a flat part on the actual paddle thing which actually locates with the metal cap, and you can see we've got 2, and that's kind of how they work. So that's the way that this goes around. So we can see this is the side that used to face the bearing, so that obviously goes that way, and then we know that the actual gear changer engages with this thing here, so this must be facing outwards. So that's the way that this goes. And then this part actually goes within the drum in here, and from what I know it's a bit of a pain to get these back in. So let's give it a go. I'm just going to rebuild this sort of mechanism. So I've got that all in now, so you can see the thing that they push against is in the middle of that, and if you'd got these paddles the wrong way around then that wouldn't be the case. So that is now all back together, and I think the tricky bit now is getting these spring-loaded paddle things into this drum with no issues. So let's see how we get on. Okay, so I can just see this side through here, so I can actually squeeze that in like that, and I had my finger on the other side, so that's now in there, which is really good. Next up we're going to put these bolts in, and with all the other bolts within the case I am going to put some Loctite on here. Okay then, so the next thing to go in is this gear shift shaft, whatever it's called. This is actually going to go through the seal on the other side, so I will just chuck some oil on this quickly. Okay then, so I've got some oil on this gear shift shaft, I think is what I call it. I'm going to put this through the cases now, and obviously this is going to go through the seal on the other side, so just got to be aware of that really. I think I might be asking a little bit too much of this box. What do we think? Okay, that's going through the seal, and that's now in. So we're just going to slide this onto here, and then obviously this just goes through the seal, just like that. And then next up we can put our gear back on along with the washer. So the gear went on that way originally, so we'll put it back on the same way. And then I am just going to stick some Loctite on this bolt here because it was impossible to get off almost. So I'm assuming it needs to be impossible to get off again for the second time. So stick a load of thread locker on here and hopefully we'll never have any problems with it. Okay then, so this is the Kickstarter mechanism, and this actually is timed, so the reason for the timing is basically to get the right amount of preload on with the spring, and there's just a tiny dot on the end of this shaft, and then there's also a tiny dot on this cam here, so you can see I've got those lined up now, hopefully. So if I just put this small spring on, I now need to get this wedge shape on this sort of cam here to go behind the bracket that I've just put on here. So you can see if I sort of start going in on this angle, then that should just go behind the bracket, and then that should slide in, and then if it comes around, that should stop turning now, so I can't turn that clockwise because it's basically bottomed out, so the thing that I've just shown you is now touching the actual engine case. But of course we've got to put the preload on this, so we have to bring the spring around and then put it in this hole within the case. So that is now all tensioned. And then there is actually a washer that goes on the front of that as well. So that is now all ready to go. And something that we can do is just get the actual Kickstarter and just see how that feels. So you can see that snaps back nicely. There's not too much force on it, but it snaps back really as you expect. So the next thing that we can do then is put this idler gear on. So there is a washer there, and then the actual gear itself, which can go either way. And you'll know you've got the Kickstarter in right because these gears here should line up perfectly. Something that I've noticed on the crank actually is that it's a lot stiffer to turn than it was before we started this job. And I'm guessing it's just because we've got a new seal in here. There's sort of a collar which goes in, which actually basically spins around on the seal, and it does seem like there's some resistance there, so I'm hoping that's okay. Obviously lubricated all of that up as well. Next thing then is going to be to actually install the clutch basket. So this is now going to tie everything together. So I am actually forgetting something very important, which is this bearing here. So this is all oiled up and ready to go. And this is actually two pieces, so you've got that metal collar, and then you've got the bearing that slides on over that. Let's put the clutch basket on. Just being careful, I don't want to knock anything because there's a lot of tension going on over here, and now you can actually see that's all connected. I'm just looking at the sort of alignment of the gears, everything looks good, so the actual crankshaft gear here actually lines up really well with the clutch basket. Okay then, so the next thing that I can put in here is the actual power valve governor. So earlier on in this video I said I don't have a clue what it is, and I saw someone else call it a governor, which does make sense. So that goes in, and that actually does mesh with this gear here as well. So if I just put this into that bearing just like that, this is again all oiled up. So that's now ready to go, and then the thing that would go in here would be the water pump. So here's the water pump shaft. Okay, so now if we turn the crank, we should see that everything obviously turns. Okay then, so now we are ready to start putting this other engine cover on. So the first thing to do is basically to put the gasket on and then get our dowel pins. Okay then, so we've got the cover here. One thing that I do need to do before we go any further is actually put another bearing in here. So I did mention earlier on in the video that I had to order another one of these 607 bearings, and it turns out I was another one short. So with the gearbox bearing kit and the crank bearings that I got, I was still, and the water pump rebuild kit, I was still actually 2 of these 607 bearings short, which basically were, you know, both of these power valve, the bearings on each side of this, for the governor. So I'm just going to install this now into this side of the case. It shouldn't be too difficult. Okay, so we're about a minute later, and I just managed to tap this bearing in with just the back of a socket, no hammering or anything like that, so that's quite nice. So yeah, now we go to put the case on. I'm guessing we actually do have to cut this gasket here to get the power valve linkage through, so let's just cut the notch out. And then the things that we're looking out for now are getting the water pump shaft on, obviously getting the governor here lined up with the bearing that we've just put in. We've also got to get this worm gear married up with this gear here. And then we've got to keep in mind that obviously this kick starter shaft is going to be coming through this oil seal, so we've just got to watch for that. So there are a few things that we just need to keep an eye on. And one thing that I'll just do now is just put some extra oil onto this water pump shaft just to make sure that that's lubricated while it's going through the seals. And then same for this Kickstarter seal, actually let's put some oil on that. So I think we're good to go now. Apparently the thing to do is to have the power valve arm pointed all the way up as you put this on, with the reason being that it won't actually reach the power valve on the cylinder if you don't do that. So I'm going to put on the water pump now, so I'm just going to put a little bit of Loctite on the actual threads of the water pump. Okay then, so the water pump is on. Again, Loctited that just so it doesn't go anywhere. Now we can start building up the actual water pump cover. So this has, well, we've got this new metal plate from Honda, and that will go on like that, but not before a gasket. So just go to our gasket kit here, let's see what we've got. There should be 2 water pump gaskets, one for either side of that metal plate. And I think they should both be the same, so let's just check that. So yeah, so both gaskets are exactly the same, so we'll just put them on in any order. So that first one is going to go, how is that going to go? Why does this feel like some sort of puzzle? Okay, so it goes that way, and this goes on in the same way that we put it on before. This thing will then go on the same way over it. And then our actual water pump housing will go on. And then if we just get some of these bolts, this was one of them. Right then, so I'm just going to turn my attention to the clutch. First of all, this actual rod goes down in here, which is how the clutch is actually activated from the cable. Next up then, we actually have a big old washer that goes on there, and then this inner hub as well. Once we've got our inner hub in, we can start to put our clutch plates on. So these just go on one by one. Okay then, so that's all of the clutch plates in. The next thing to go on is this small washer. And then this collar thing here, which to be fair you probably should replace. Probably just going to try and bend up another corner of it just to use it again. I should have got another one really. And then obviously the actual nut that goes on here. And I've heard that these can provide issues when they're torqued up, so I'm thinking of just basically putting it on as tight as I can. It's a steel nut on a steel rod, so I don't think too much can go wrong there. Right, so that's a 27mm, and we'll torque this to spec right now. Okay, that is torqued to spec. So this collar, although I should have reused it, does have a couple of new edges. So we'll get the most out of it. So I think just getting some pliers on this is the best thing to do, and then pretty much just bend it up like that. Okay then, so that's all the clutch plates in. The next thing to go on is this little thrust bearing here, which just goes into the centre. So once that's in there, that actually marries up with this other hub thing, which goes on here. And essentially what happens is when you pull the clutch lever, that essentially takes the pressure off here and allows those clutch plates to turn freely. But the thing that does bind it together is all of these springs. So we've got the springs to go on, and then obviously the bolts for each of those springs. And the torque setting for this is pretty low because it's going into aluminium. Can't remember what it is, so we'll just do it up very loosely to start with, and then we'll check what the torque setting is supposed to be and just go with that. So just on the lowest setting here on the impact driver, I'm going to go around in a star pattern just to put the pressure on the aluminium evenly. Okay then, so the manual there just says that it goes to 10 Newton meters, so alright then, so it's just this cover to put back on now then. Okay, what bolts do these need? I think they're just the short ones, aren't they? They're just these short ones. Right then, so we've pretty much got this side back together. Got a couple more bolts that I need to go and get out of the shed. Just testing it with the Kickstarter kind of shows that everything looks okay. Turns over smoothly. Obviously the Kickstarter works fine. There's no weird resistance, no weird noises. So that all feels and sounds really smooth, which is good. So now let's have a look at the other side of the engine. So you can see from earlier on when we were getting the cases together, we've got this oil seal to put back in, so I guess we can probably just go right ahead and do that. Get some grease on this, and then some grease on the outer edge as well, basically just grease the whole thing. That should go straight on there. And then hopefully this socket will help us to get this on. Not quite long enough, okay, no worries. So I think we can probably just use the socket end of this 8mm. Just gently guide it in. Okay, so that's nice and flush all the way around. Next up then we have this this ring that goes over here to create this seal. Now I got two O-rings in the kit, and so far I don't really know what both are for. This doesn't really fit in here, and the other one's even bigger. And the old O-ring that came off was a slightly different shape. Well, it's like a specialist O-ring essentially. So I feel like I might need to put this back on and then actually just order a proper one of these, because this is quite easy to change when the engine's in the bike. And put some fresh grease on it. To be honest, the O-ring looks fine. Like, there's no actual damage on it, so, and it wasn't leaking before. So this will be fine for now. Okay, so that's clean. Let's just put some fresh grease on it. And then we can install it in the new collar here. Seeing that fits perfectly. It's really weird that they included a collar and not the O-ring. Just going to grease up the inside of this collar as well. And the outside as well, actually, while we're at it. Okay, that looks good. Right then, so I guess we're starting to move on to the top end now and the cylinder. So first thing that I've got to do with the cylinder is get this old bearing out, because it is horrendous. So we've got a brand new bearing just here. So I'm going to apply some heat to the cylinder, and hopefully we can get this bearing to pretty much just fall out. Take a listen to this power valve bearing. I'm not sure that bearings are supposed to sound so crispy. Just looking at the cylinder now, the where the bearing came out, there's loads of carbon, so hopefully you can see that. Just need to give this a quick clean, and then we'll be able to put the new bearing in. Okay then, so here's our new little bearing. It is a shielded bearing, so it's shielded on both sides. This one is a 689Z or Z. I'm just going to put some grease on the outer race, and then probably a bit on the inner race as well. Well, I've just got that bearing in there, and that was annoyingly the only bearing out of the whole engine rebuild that got me to get the actual metal hammer out. So I didn't show it on film because I had to go and put it in the vise, and I just had a socket on it, but it needed a proper hammer really. These kind of bearings, you have to be really careful not to actually ruin this metal shield here, because like obviously if you hit the inner race and if you catch this thin shield, then you're gonna basically not seize up the bearing, but you're gonna stop the metal shield from doing its job. Luckily the bearing still runs perfectly smooth, so that's turning now. It's really obviously perfectly smooth, just like it should be. And then the next thing that we can do then is have a look at the actual fitment between the piston and the cylinder. So this is the only part of this job that's really supposedly been done by a professional, so this should fit perfectly. So I'm just going to get some 2-stroke oil. Get some on my finger, and then obviously give the full piston a coat, and a similar thing on the actual cylinder as well. So the piston obviously is at the bottom of the cylinder here, and funnily enough the cylinder is actually warm, so it's still hot from when I got that bearing out. I decided to try to put the bearing in while it was warm, just to try and make it easier. So the cylinder is actually still pretty hot to the touch, and there is absolutely no I can't feel any play, I can't feel any actual wobble room between the piston and the cylinder, but obviously you can see there that moves quite easily, like it moves under its own weight, so it's certainly not stuck, as we can demonstrate here. Now I have to say that it's very different to the piston that I installed previously, where there was a lot more slop essentially, and I think that's what caused ultimately the wear as well on the piston. I mean that seems good to me. Fingers crossed that all works well on the bike. Okay then, so I think the next job is pretty much going to be to put the cylinder on, which is quite exciting. So I've got the gasket here. So this is interesting. So I've got a Wasner piston and a Wasner crankshaft, but they come with different bearings. Question is, which one of those bearings is best? I feel like I prefer the look of this one here, because the actual bearings are wider, right? Okay then, so I've got the piston ring here. Of course, going to give this a very thin coating of oil as well. I will just measure the piston ring gap. Put the ring in, and then obviously do the usual trick of squaring it off with the piston. And then we'll just measure that gap. Okay then, so I've just got the ring in the cylinder, and again I'm just on the same Honda manual, and I'm looking for the actual spec of what that piston ring gap should be. Piston ring end gap, we're working in millimeters here, should be 0.4 to 0.55 millimeters. So we're looking at this. Piston ring end gap, 0.4 to 0.55. Just got my feeler gauges here, so let's have a look at these. What do we go down to here? We've got 0.2, let's have a look at that. 0.2 fits. Let's try 0.3. Okay, so we're currently at 0.3 and we need to be at 0.4, so I guess it's just a case of getting a little bit of sandpaper. Just a case of getting a little bit of sandpaper just on this inner edge here, just to take that to the 0.4 of the specification. Okay then, so I spent about 5 or 10 minutes messing around with sandpaper, but I don't think the sandpaper that I've got was even good enough to touch this stuff, to be honest. So I ended up just using one of these little files. So this is just a flat edge file, and that meant that I could also file it really flat, and it literally took a couple of minutes then. And I've got the 0.4mm feeler gauge, and I am now comfortably within that. Got 0.45mm here. So 0.45 go in there tightly, so I don't think that's reliable. So I think it's fair to say that we're on about 0.4, which is obviously the smallest spec of acceptable. So that's quite good. Okay then, so the next thing that I'm going to do is put the piston ring on the piston. So I'm just going to pour a small amount of 2-stroke into this groove, and then just use a small paintbrush, or actually it's already doing it itself, just to get it all the way around there. It's already running around, so didn't really need the paintbrush. And then now we can get the ring on. So you can see the small pin here, which is obviously where the end of the ring goes. So it's just a case of actually putting that in the gap and then feeding it round, just like that. That piston ring is now on. Next up then, we can put the actual piston onto the conrod. So I'm just lubing up the small end bearing here, just in some 2-stroke oil. Put that in there. Might be worth just putting a touch of 2-stroke oil in this actual small end. Then we'll put the bearing in. And then we can slide the piston over, keeping in mind that the arrow faces the exhaust, which on the bike is obviously towards the front of the engine. And then it's just a case of sliding this through. And actually I just realised, before I actually put the piston on, I'm going to put one of the clips on one side, because I think that's just less risky. And then we can actually put the clip on the other side, obviously when the piston's on the bike. So we do have 2 clips that came with the kit, and they are here. Okay then, so I'm just going to put these, the first clip into the first side here. Now, I looked online, because there are opinions about which direction you actually put this. Best opinions I can find seem to say put the gap facing upwards. So, should be able to pretty much just put this in with my hands. Okay then, so we got the clip in there really well. That obviously landed in there with a really reaffirming click. Now we actually have to look at the top of the piston to look for the arrow on here, which says exit, or exhaust rather. So obviously that points towards the front of the bike, which is where the exhaust goes out. So now we can actually put the piston on. And then we've just got to repeat what we did to get that clip in, but with the piston on the bike. So obviously at this stage we absolutely do not want to drop the clip into the bottom end. So I'm going to put this rag here to fully protect the bottom end, just in case I drop it. So all I did before was basically slid this in, sort of compressing it like this with the gap facing upwards. And then once I had it on the edge, I just used the pointy bit of this file just to actually push it in that last little bit. I just thought as well, actually, I need to cover up this part here. Okay. There you go, dropped it for the first time. Okay, so I've just got that half seated. So now, just pushing this in, we should hear that nice click. Right then, so I've just done a quick test fit of the cylinder, making sure that everything turns over okay, and it does. What I've just done now then is actually cleaned off the actual power valve flap things, whatever they're called. Lots of carbon on these, so you do need to sort of really scrub them. In my case, I had to use sort of a metal spike thing. It was kind of like a blunt metal spike, so it was just something that was hard really to actually scrape all the carbon off. So these valves go into here, and they always go in the way that I don't expect them to. So let's see, so they go together like that, and that means that if they're in there, they need to go in like that. Okay, and then here's our mechanism and our shaft. This is all oiled up, by the way. I think this should go in just... Okay then, so I've got the power valves in now, and we're going to put the cylinder onto the actual engine casings. So the cylinder is already oiled, as well as the piston, so I don't need to add anything here, but obviously you just got to make sure that is oiled before you put it on. Okay, and then we've got the 4 bolts that hold the cylinder on. The other thing that goes on here then is a washer and then a clip. So I've got a new clip here from Honda. Okay, so the clip goes on like that in their picture. And then now we've got a power valve that looks about right. So there was a torque spec of that bolt, which was... So the torque spec for that bolt is 9 Newton meters in the manual. Okay then, so the next thing to do is to put the cylinder head studs in. Okay, so I was just getting ready to put the head on, but actually ended up watching a video because the manual wasn't clear on which way the cylinder head goes, sorry, the head gasket. So obviously you've got these little embossed sort of oval things here going around the edge, and I wasn't sure whether they face downwards or upwards. The manual says that the gasket will have a mark on it that says up, and obviously you put that facing up, but this one doesn't have any text. So I've just watched another video on YouTube, so credit to this guy, Brian D. Mobley, and he basically does explain that he's got a Honda gasket which does say up on it, and he's explained that the embossed parts face up. So I will just put that up. And lastly, I've just realised that I've not torqued down the actual cylinder bolts yet, so I'm just going to torque those down now. So these 4 bolts around the cylinder actually take 27 Newton meters according to the manual. So we want to do that in a crisscross pattern, so I'm just going to gradually tighten these up on each corner. And what I will say is I can't get the torque wrench in here, so I'm going to have to essentially just go by feel. Obviously I will have done 3 others then to get a feel for where we're at with the torque, and then I just need to sort of basically guess on that 3rd one. And then we'll go ahead and put our gasket on. So as I said, the embossed parts face upwards. So I'll put those facing upwards. And then we've got our cylinder head here. We've already got our dowel pins in. Just going to put a touch of grease on those dowel pins. Not very much at all. Then we can put the head on. And then obviously lastly we can go ahead and put the head bolts on. Okay then, so these cylinder head bolts get torqued to 27 Newton meters. Okay, so I'm just going to put the power valve gasket on now. So as it says here, we've got 650 millilitres, so we'll just measure this out. So I've got 500 millilitres here. It works.